Hi guys, a couple of you reached out to me asking me if there was a way to constrain the position of an object through parenting so that the object follows another object and then at some point within your animation to disconnect that parenting, to be able to let go of the object so that they behave separately after that point. The short answer is yes, but it does take a little bit of setting up, so I put together this video to show you how to do it. So in this scene, I have basically what is a make arm, so it's nothing fantastic. What I want to do is I want to rig it. So I want to go ahead and switch my menu to the rigging menu, and I want to create a joint structure that matches the position that arm, and then I'm going to control it through an IK. So what I want to do is I want to go to the skeleton menu, create joints, and then I'm going to snap to points by pressing the V key on the keyboard so that I snap to the center point of each one of these joints. And then for the last one, I'm simply going to let go of V, press the shift key to constrain to the Z-axis, and then hit return. Now I have my arm set up. Now in my outliner, I am going to go ahead and parent each one of the pieces of the arm to each one of the joints that I have just created. So this portion of the arm where the magnet is, it's called the arm end, and that becomes a child of my joint 4. So I'll select that and press P. My pin 3, which is this one, becomes a child of joint 3. My pin 2 becomes a child of joint 2, and my pin 1 becomes a child of joint 1. Now, if I select joint 1, everything gets selected as we expected it. Now, I want to create my IK solver from my base joint to the end joint. So I want to go ahead and click on skeleton, create IK handle. Now, for this IK handle, I want to make sure that I actually have this option selected, single chain solver. And the reason for that is because this actually secures and makes sure that my motion is going to be planar. It's based on the side view, which is where I'm working right now, and I want to maintain it that way. So if I choose single chain solver, that's what's going to do. If I choose rotate plane solver, then that means that it could be moving sideways, and I want to avoid that. Now you can control that afterwards by limiting the motion of your IK, but right now, just since I have that option, I'm going to select that option. And I am going to now click at the base of the joint structure, then click at the end, and now I have my IK solver. If I move it, my arm responds as I expected. Now with that done, what I want to do is I want to control this IK handle from an actual object, like we've done in class with helpers like circles and curves and things like that. I want to go ahead and use a locator this time. So I want to go ahead and create a locator. So I'll go to create, click on locator, and there's my locator. This locator I'm going to place right in front of my arm, close enough to my IK handle, but not on top of it. I want it outside so that I do not have any geometry in front of me disrupting what I'm doing. I'm going to rename that locator arm control or controller. Control is fine, arm control. And now what I want to make is a constraint between that object and the IK handle. So I'll select the parent first, then the object that is going to be constrained, and I'm going to add a constraint of point type. So constraint point, make sure that I go to its options and make sure that I reset the settings. What I want to do is I want to make sure that I constrain all axes so that that locator controls the IK handle. And then I want to make sure that I maintain offset so that my arm does not snap to my locator when I click add, so that I maintain that distance. I want to maintain that distance. The whole point of the locator was so that I didn't have to be clicking on all that geometry to try to get to the IK or keep on going to the outliner to select it here, which can become cumbersome. So I'll just go ahead and say add, and now my arm constrain, my arm locator controls the actual IK handle, and that's exactly what I want. Now you'll notice that when I move this up and down, my arm swivels inward. When I go up, it swivels outward, and I want to avoid that. I want this to be always pointing down so that I can pick up the actual box. So for that, I want to go ahead and constrain the rotation of joint 4 to the rotation of my locator. You will notice that my locator is never rotating. It's always going up and down or back and forward. So I know that this will never rotate. So because of that if I constrain that joint to that locator, this swivel will never, this part of the arm will never swivel. So I'm going to go ahead and select the arm control, then control select the joint 4, which is the joint that controls that entire section. And then I am going to apply a orient constraint. So I'm going to go ahead and go orient constraint options. And I want to make sure that I reset settings again. maintain offset so that I maintain the distance between all the items, and click add. So now when I move my locator up and down, this thing does not swivel anymore. When I go to the front, it doesn't swivel. It's always pointing downward, and that's exactly what I needed to do. So at this point, now that I have this entire thing set up, I want to go ahead and parent all of the structure that I have created to that swivel base, which is the thing that will be rotating my geometry on the scene. So if I go ahead and select the swivel base, actually I'll select the joint and the entire structure, and I also need to select the locator and the IK handle to go in there as well, so that everything is controlled by the swivel base. So let's go ahead and select the swivel base last and press P. And now all of that structure becomes a child of the swivel base. So if I select the swivel base and I rotate it, let's switch my tool to the rotate tool, the entire thing rotates with it, but I still have control of my IK to control the arm independently. So that's pretty much set up already. Now what we want to do is we want to go ahead and pick up that cargo box through the magnet at the end of this rig and move it to this platform on this side. So to do so, we would have to keyframe things, specifically rotation and position of this. So let's go ahead and bring this down so that it's on top of the cargo box. So around, I'm looking at the values for translation here, and this happens to be, you know what I didn't do? I didn't freeze transformations for this locator before I plugged it into this. I should have done that so that I could count on numbers, but let's just go ahead and go with values like what we're looking at right now. So I'll place this right here, and I'll say that's about 16.3. So you would have to remember these values basically. If you freeze transformations, these values would be a lot more solid. So let me make that 30. Might be a bit too 30.5 for translate Y. And so now I have this object, 30.5. Now I have this object right on top of the cargo box, and that's what I want. At this point, I want to go ahead and make this object a child. I want to create a parent constraint to the locator. So if I go ahead and select the locator first and then shift select the cargo box, then I can go ahead and apply a constraint of type parent. Let's go to the options, make sure that I reset them so that everything is set to default, and make sure that I maintain the offset so that the distance remains, and click add. So now when I move my locator, that box moves with it. The important thing about this operation is that if I select the cargo box, you'll notice that I now have a new attribute under the channels box that is called arm control W01. It's a value of 1. And that is the controller influence that this locator has over that specific box. So let's go ahead and move this around. Let's go to this viewport here. Let's move the swivel base, rotate it, and if I rotate it about, let's say, negative 90 degrees, then the box is right on top of my platform here. So at this point, I can go ahead and select the platform itself, then select my cargo box, and even though the cargo box is already parented to the locator, I can actually apply a new parent constraint to that object from the platform. So I selected the platform, then I selected the cargo box, and then I can go constraint parent. And since I had the options from before, it's going to retain those options. You'll notice now that under the cargo box, now I have a new attribute that is called platform W1 equals 1. Now, this is basically telling that object that you have now two parent constraints, and both of them are exerting an influence value of 1 on that object at this point. So if I were to rotate my swivel base back, let's say I rotate it, you'll notice that basically the box only moves halfway between my locator, which is here, and my base. But if I go ahead and select the cargo box, let me go ahead and switch this so we can see it. Select the cargo box and change the influence of platform to 0, then it goes to the magnet. If I do the reverse, which is I make this 1, make the arm 0, then it goes to that one. So I can go ahead and with these values set up, I can now go ahead and right click and set keyframes for this and determine where in my animation things will be where depending on the value of these keyframes. So say, for example, let's make this value 0 here. And what I want to do is I want to go ahead and set an initial resting value for the object. So the resting value is where the object will start its animation. In this case, the cargo box is going to start here. So I'm going to go to constrain and I'm going to set rest position. Now, setting this rest position, what it's going to do is it's going to make sure that if I make the value of the arm control 0, the box remains where it is. Let me not set the rest position first, and let me change the value of the arm control to 0. Watch what happens. It moves to the base and to the platform. And the reason for that is because the platform is the last parent, the last object that was parented. So it's going to be pulling it towards it. So let me undo that. However, if I go ahead and select that box, constrain, set rest position, then it's going to know that those are the initial values and this is the initial position for the box. Now, when I go and switch my arm control to 0, the value of 0, now this box remains where it's at, and I can go ahead and move this around without influencing the box at this point. So I can now go ahead and keyframe things. So for example, if I go press, let's say I'm going to add some keyframes here really quick. Let's go ahead and add a keyframe here with a value of, I don't know, let's actually with the values that it has. Let's go ahead and select the rotation of the swivel base, make it 0. And that's a little bit off. That was off before, I guess. So we'll go ahead and work with that. We'll start with a value of 5 on that. So I'm going to go ahead and set rotation values for this. So I'm going to go ahead and say rotation value for this, Shift E, Shift E to create keyframes for that. And then in about 30 or 20 frames, I'm going to go back to this other side. So I'm going to go to, what was the value? -90, was it what we had before? -90. That is, I'm going to place it right on top of the platform and top of that panel here, the plane that I have here. And so that creates a new keyframe for that. And then I can go ahead and move this all the way at 40 to where it was before, which is whatever we had before, which is value of 5, I think is what, I can't remember what the value was, but something that places it where it was originally. So now the goal is for this to slide that box over there. So with the cargo box selected, actually, let's go ahead and select this value here. And I'm going to make a copy of that exact same value at this point. So I'm going to shift select, right click this, copy. Then I'm going to go to frame 21 and paste that. So I have 2 keyframes for the exact same value right there. And that's because I'm going to use that for the switching on the control of the box. So at this point right here, I want to go ahead and select my cargo box, and I want my arm control to have a value of 1 and my platform to have a value of 0. So if I select those 2 things and I right click, I can say key selected, and that creates a keyframe for them. Then the box is going to go along with the arm up to this point. And at this point, I want to make the switch. So at this point, I want to go ahead and make sure that these values stay the way they are. And in the next frame, I'm going to reverse those values. So now the arm is 0 and this guy is 1. And now what's going to happen is when the arm goes back, it no longer has control over the box. So the box is control, it's dropped, and now the arm goes back. So this is how you would set up the switch to control the position of an object by parenting it to 2 different objects within your scene.